If you want to get pregnant like yesterday, like let's do it because I know
Mhm.
firsthand what it's like to want to get pregnant and not be able to get pregnant when you want.
Mm.
But if you're not in a rush to be able to start to connect with your body a lot more and be like, oh, look
Yeah.
at that kind of CM, or like, oh, I'm noticing this sign, or oh, I'm noticing my increased hunger around this time, that you can start to connect with your body more deeply. And
Mhm.
that in turn builds that really self awareness, that inner confidence of being able to make sure your cycle never falls off track.
Hey, fans and listeners. It's Lindsey Elizabeth Cortes, your registered dietitian, sports dietitian, and I have a returning guest today, Cynthia Donovan. Cynthia is a registered dietitian nutritionist with over 15 years of experience, specializing in helping women recover from hypothalamic amenorrhea, otherwise known as HA. Drawing from both personal and professional insights, Cynthia founded the Recipe for a Period in 2020, guiding hundreds of women towards reclaiming their periods, restoring fertility, and achieving true health. Her holistic approach empowers women to balance fitness, nutrition, and well being. Outside of her work, Cynthia enjoys exploring nature, traveling, rock climbing, and making memories with her two energetic boys. Cynthia, thank you so much for coming back on the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast.
Yes, I am so excited to be here, Lindsay.
Yeah, it's great that we've been able to build a relationship and, refer clients to each other, share resources. I think our work overlaps quite a bit regarding dealing with women and some of their hormonal issues. Specifically, the hormonal issues that you and I see a lot is actually a lack of hormones
Yeah.
firing. And so I see that coming from like athletes in the athletic space, and they might be dealing with a condition we call REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport. But honestly, the same thing is kind of happening in your population. Some of your clients are athletes,
Mm.
whether or not they identify as that, but exercise is part of their problem. But you, we call it HA, which is what it is, hypothalamic amenorrhea. We can get all into that. And I know we've talked about it before, but just give us a quick overview of what is HA, a definition.
So I want to kind of tie it in with red S a little bit. So
Yeah.
you can have red S and not, and you can still have a period, right?
Hmm.
But if you have HA and you're an athlete, you probably have red S. So that kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not everyone loses their period, which is crazy. And that comes down to a genetic factor there, because a
Hmm.
lot of what I hear from the women I work with is like, why does she have a period and I don't? Why can she get pregnant and I don't? And it's like, first of all, we don't know their story, but also given we put them side by side and we did all the same things for the same exact time we've been on this earth, she could have a period and you couldn't.
Right.
But HA, so
Yeah.
this is where your hypothalamus is impacted by you not eating enough and not resting enough. So it is disturbing the HPT axis, and that is really going to kind of like shut off. I don't want to say shut off your hypothalamus, but in essence, it's not going to signal the right things to your hypothalamus, such as your LH, your FSH, and we're going to talk a lot about hormones today, or lab values
Yeah.
of that, to signal like it is safe around here to be able to have a baby in essence, even though maybe you're not wanting to have a baby. So yeah, and it affects 17.4 million worldwide. And these are
Oh,
just
wow.
yeah, these are just women, and these stats actually come from my colleague. Her name is Dr. Christiana Schufel, and she's leading research with functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, or HA for short. And so they're estimating about 17.4 million worldwide are affected by this that know about it. And here's the thing with
Mhm.
HA, many women don't know they even have it because they're on the birth control pill, and that masks any menstrual irregularities. So, and I got
Mhm.
some more stats for you if you guys are stats kind of people. Uh
Yeah, let's hear
yeah,
it.
so an estimated in the US 1.62 million. The average age is 26 years old. 50% of competitive athletes suffer from HA,
Mhm.
and 35% of these females are actually college students,
Yeah.
which is interesting, right? And so women with hypothalamic amenorrhea are often misdiagnosed as having PCOS, which is another big thing.
Mhm,
So, and a little bit more stats, it affects bone loss, or it affects your bones, it affects your heart.
mhm, mhm.
So, when you have had your period missing for more than 6 months, that could potentially be the equivalent of having bones of that of a 51-year-old woman. Okay? So, which is
Can you repeat that?
so
Missing period for how many months?
So the mean okay, so I'm going to read this the stat off. So HA
Yeah.
is associated with bone loss, okay? So that means it doesn't mean it's
Mhm.
the direct cause, so association versus, cause. The mean bone density of a young woman with 6 or more months of HA is equivalent to that of a woman of 51 years of age.
Okay.
So, and again, this is coming from research from Dr. Christiana Schufelt, who is really leading the way, at least that I'm aware of, in HA research, because there's not a lot out there. And right
Yeah.
now, I can't remember the exact number. There's, I think, over 3,000 original publications on PCOS, and there's
Mhm.
like a little over 100 on HA. And don't quote me on the exact numbers, but it's that big of a gap. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we need more research in this area. And Lindsay, I can drop you a link if you want to include it in the show notes, that women that do have missing periods, they can apply to be a part of research.
Yes.
And yeah, so, and there's some really cool, what's the word I'm looking for? Perks if you do this. Not only are you going to be able to get a detailed report of lab work, of you can even
Mhm.
get a DEXA scan. So yeah, so I'll give that to you after our show.
Yes, we definitely wanna share that with our listeners because, some people are so frustrated. "Why aren't there more resources? Why don't more people know about this? Why aren't my doctors caring?" And it's like, because we need more research. So become a participant. So be involved in the solution to your own problem. And so we'll definitely share that if people can become study participants, if you believe you have HA yourself. And I think this is important because I'm currently looking, if anybody's listening to this, I'm looking to get some guests on this podcast to talk about PCOS because I know it's definitely a problem in women. Do you have I know you didn't come on here to talk about that, but do you have any statistics there? Isn't it like is it 10% of women have
So I don't
PCOS?
have stats of that, but
Okay.
what I can tell you is that the misdiagnosis with women
Yeah.
that have HA
Yeah.
is alarming. And here's the thing. Maybe
Yeah.
you're like, "Well, my doctor did diagnose it and I'm pretty sure I have it, but then also my period's been missing for a really long time." Well, we need to treat that HA first.
You could have both.
Yes, you could have both.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say I haven't come across it very frequently, but it has happened before. And the thing is, we
Yeah.
have to get you refueled first, and then get your period back, and then we deal with the PCOS. And I typically tend to refer out because that's not my area of
Specialty.
specialty. Yeah.
Right. 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 Yeah. I think, when we look at oh boy, I don't know if I'm using the right term here, demographics or social graphics, but that anybody could have PCOS. But when we look at HA, this is really the root cause is we're overstressing our body with not enough fuel and nourishment and rest, and then too much activity and stress. And so again, the type of people that you and I deal with are typically like they're exercising a lot,
Mhm.
they maybe been trying to eat clean or healthy for a long time. They're striving for a certain body type or body weight. And so then it's like for those type of people, because they're engaging in those behaviors, their period goes missing. Yeah, it's possible they have PCOS, but because of what led to your period going away,
Mm.
this is not PCOS is an issue with the ovaries that are producing too many cysts on them and disrupting hormones versus this is a behavior
Mm.
or a lifestyle that you engaged in that affected your hypothalamus. Those are
Yeah.
two different root causes. And so that's why like, for me too, I think I've had in my, nearly 500 clients that I've had in the past few years like I think only one of them has truly had PCOS. So it's definitely something to rule out. But yes, with this conversation, we're focusing on HA. And I think, as you mentioned, okay, we have some statistics 50% of athletes might have it, a lot of college students have it. It was interesting how you mentioned that average age of 26. I'm just thinking about why that might be. I'm also like, I feel like 20s is when women are most often on birth control and also might not even know that they
Mhm.
are dealing with it.
Yeah. Well, that's when I had it in my 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I was on birth control, so I don't know in
And,
my
well,
20s.
I
Yeah.
didn't find out until I came off birth control, but I was on, I can't tell you how many times I hear the story, Lindsay. Well, I've been on the pill since a teenager and I've come off
Yeah.
because, it's about that time. Maybe I'm going to start thinking about having kids and so forth. And then it's like, oh, where's my period? And
Mhm.
along the way, I was also misdiagnosed with PCOS, which when you
You
are
were.
misdiagnosed with PCOS, and that's why you got to be like so like sure that it is because you can drive yourself deeper into HA because somebody might tell you, well, you got to be careful of your carbs because you're more at risk for diabetes. That was me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh crap, like I'm not going to eat any carbs then. Oh, exercise
Mhm.
helps PCOS. Okay, I'm going to exercise more than I already was, you know?
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
that's why it's really important to make sure like that's that. And I actually, Lindsay, I'm giving you a link to, I like to call it my fact sheet. It's a guide of like, all right, this is what your labs would look like if it was PCOS. This is what they would look like if they were
Oh,
HA. So
perfect.
that you guys out there that are like, okay, this sounds like me, you can print that bad boy out and you can bring it to your doctor's
Mhm,
appointment and be like,
mhm,
here. And
mhm.
and feel free to reach out to me if your doctor wants, journal references or medical references. I'd be happy to
Yeah.
supply that.
Right, because yeah, the symptom of a missing menstrual cycle, you still have to understand the root cause in order to treat it
Yes.
properly because yeah, PCOS would have different dietary and lifestyle interventions than dysfunctional hypothalamic amenorrhea.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
regardless, I just wanna say whatever kind of menstrual irregularity or issue that might be going on, birth control is not the answer. What is the root cause is what you
Mhm.
need to get down to, and then go from there.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, birth control is the answer to not have babies, but there's also other options
Yes, absolutely.
to not have babies. There's other ways to not do that, but yeah, to regulate or control or fix menstrual cycle problems, maybe birth control is not
Mm,
certainly not the only option.
yes.
We'll start with
Yeah.
that. Certainly not the only option, and in this case of like irregular menstrual cycles. So I think that's a topic I wanted to go over with you. So there's because I kind of wanted to have this conversation where we could compare. I wanted to talk about lab work and like
Mm.
diagnosis. So, and I think we're already kind of hinting at this that it's lab work is helpful, but also like what are some
Oh, it's not the full
lifestyle
picture.
choices
Yeah.
we've made? Yeah, it's not the whole picture. So we'll start there. It's not the whole picture. We already mentioned like genetics are at play
Mhm.
here, too. But what is okay, first of all, somebody who's like, I haven't had a menstrual cycle in 6 months. I'd like to go to my doctor. What labs should we draw to figure out if this is HA or possibly something else?
Yeah. So I would say full like female hormonal panel, which will include your estradiol or your estrogen levels, your
Mhm,
FSH, your LH, and I would say progesterone levels as well. You could probably throw a thyroid in there as well. It's not like under the female hormones, but just to check to see if that's okay. Majority of women do have lower thyroid levels. You
mhm,
can also get your testosterone level checked as well. So that's your androgen. And typically when your androgen is higher, that more notes PCOS
mhm,
than HA. But I would say those are the main things. You can throw an AMH, which is anti-malarian hormone in there as well. But I would say the biggies that, I would want to know like, if I was the patient, like, for me as a practitioner, you can
yeah,
come to me and be like, "I haven't had a period for X, Y, and Z. This is what my lifestyle is." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Like, this is kinda textbook. Now, I can't diagnose
yeah.
because I'm not a doctor, but I'm saying I don't need your labs to know how to help you get to that root cause and treat that. But
Well, you don't need labs to know how to improve somebody's diet either, right? That's what you and I
no.
are dietitians. We can look at somebody's diet and look at their symptoms and
Yeah.
say, oh, you know,
Yes,
this
but
food's going to help you.
I would say most of us that are type A like to see the quantitativeness of
Oh, yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
So, but I would say the main ones, estradiol, FSH, LH, progesterone, and your testosterone levels. That would be
Yeah.
yeah, those would be the biggies.
Yeah. I agree with getting the testosterone checked as well, because if it, as we're talking about other conditions, it might be typically with PCOS, you would see higher testosterone, slightly higher, right? Am I correct on
Yep,
this?
yep.
Versus in functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, you wouldn't necessarily. So that's one differentiating factor. In my world with athletes, I do like to get the full thyroid panel that
Mhm.
you
Yep.
mentioned because that's really indicative of your that that that's actually really helpful for me in diagnosing REDS, specifically
Yes.
the thyroid
Especially if they
panel,
still have a
because
period, right?
yes, so sometimes people who do have a menstrual cycle, we get the lab work done and we'll see low, maybe still normal, but low normal
Mhm.
thyroid levels, and looking at the difference between TSH, T4, T3, you can differentiate between, oh, you don't just have like hypothyroidism. This is actually coming from energy
Yeah.
deficiency and REDS. So you can differentiate that because, sorry to go on a tangent here, but what I see, like you were talking about, the PCOS gets misdiagnosed for HA often, and I see hypothyroidism, doctors diagnosing people with REDS with hypothyroidism. And that's not true because going on a thyroid medication does not, it'll falsely improve their thyroid levels, but it won't fix the root
Yeah, it
cause
doesn't get to that root cause.
and get to that root cause. So I'll throw that in there of somebody who's, you know, REDS, HA, all that. Like, I think the thyroid panel might be helpful
Mhm.
there to look at energy availability. That's what it's showing us is a recap of that. So that's great. Can you talk? I have no clue what AMH is.
So
Can you
that's
teach me?
anti-Müllerian hormone. So that
Okay.
is the what a lot of fertility doctors use as like, "Oh, you're gonna need fertility meds or not." So in a
Oh.
nutshell, yeah, which is not true at all, and it leaves a lot of women going straight to IVF, going straight to like,
Mhm.
non for it's not treating the root cause again.
Yeah.
So and it scares people, and this is where I've even had someone tell me, I think she was from India or another country, and she's like, "My doctor told me because my AMH is low and I have no eggs left that I need to get a surrogate." Like,
Wow.
even to the like yeah. So it is so pretty much it's a hormone secreted by small follicles in your ovaries.
Okay.
And I do want to come back, Lindsay, to the PCOS thing because it kind of goes with these follicles in our ovaries that are cysts in the
Mhm.
misdiagnosis. But to speak on the AMH level, so your doctor is ordering this to really check your ovarian reserve and predict how many eggs are available or predict how you might respond to fertility treatment. And the
Okay.
thing that you guys need to know is that AMH alone cannot predict your ovarian reserve without a count of your antral follicles. So, but women with HA should be really special consideration of AMH levels. And just to give you an example, if you've been told this, I've had many women with super low AMH levels go on to get their periods and get pregnant again. So it's
Okay.
not, if you get that drawn, because I got it drawn when I was actually struggling with HA, I'm like, oh, good. Like I have eggs. Sometimes it can be normal. Sometimes it can be low.
Okay.
Being high, I think that goes a little bit more into a POI or DO or so POI is primary ovarian insufficiency and
Mhm.
DOR is oh my gosh, I'm losing the thought of this. Something ovarian reserve. And AMH alone, if you've ever been diagnosed with either of those ones, doesn't indicate like that's what you have based on AMH levels. So it's a little bit confusing, but old school thought is like AMH. If it's low, you're like screwed. You need IVF. But that is not not true at all.
Is
So
it something that's more helpful for those who have a regularly occurring menstrual cycle, who are ovulating but are still struggling to get pregnant? Is it like maybe at that point in time
oh,
this is helpful or still no?
so still no. Which
Okay.
leads me into Lindsay luteal phase defect.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about that.
So
Yeah.
this is where I like to say, and is before we go into that, is there anything else you want to close out on AMA?
No,
Okay.
thank you for teaching me that. I
Yeah.
didn't know what that was.
Yeah. So and I hate that it's used so lightly of like, this is your fertility, especially if a
Yeah.
woman has HA and has no period. Like, no.
Yeah, it's like let's focus on solving that problem first
Yes.
because then your chances of fertility and conceiving or yeah, it's going to be a totally different ball game when you have your hormones in place. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it just seems like that's confusing the situation. If you're dealing with HA, don't worry about testing AMH or worrying about those numbers just yet, potentially not at all, but definitely not right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought,
Yeah.
Lindsay, I had some stats on luteal phase defect, but here's
Okay.
the thing. Many, and I see this time and time again on so many athletes, and I can't say that this is what they're struggling with, but this is my intuition, my guess that this is what they're struggling with is a luteal phase defect, where they're like, I'm ovulating, like I'm having like somewhat normal cycles or even regular cycles, but they're luteal phase. So you have your follicular phase, which is the first part of your cycle, and then that's followed by ovulation, then your luteal, and then menstruation, or however
Mhm.
you want to organize. If you say menstruation comes first, whatever. But when that luteal phase is too short, less than 10 days, or
Yeah.
progesterone being less than, I think it's 8 nanograms per milliliter, if I remember that right, that is going to indicate a luteal phase defect. So while, the ovarian system like functions at a quote unquote level good enough to ovulate, but that luteal phase is too short or
Mhm.
it's not going to be adequate to support implementation. So many
Yeah.
athletes are like, well, but I'm ovulating. I know I'm ovulating and I can't get pregnant. And you know what's up with that? And I'm
Yeah.
not saying like we'll just call it LPD for short. I'm not saying like that is the reason, but it's something worth exploring. And that's where we fall
Yeah.
into what I like to call is the HA spectrum, and this is not like I guess a thing. This is something after reading a research article, my colleague and I were like, yeah, there's like a spectrum of this. Like you don't just always just lose your period, right?
Mhm.
You can have an ovulatory cycle, right? You
Mhm.
can have a luteal phase defect. You could have cycles that are spaced out greater than 35 days and still get a regular period and ovulation. So there's
Mhm.
like, and I'm not saying like one happens before the other, like, okay, this happens and then this happens and then this happens,
Right.
right?
No.
We
Yeah.
can't really say that because so many women are not, and I know I was one of them, and I'm sure you were too, Lindsay. Like, I didn't know anything about my menstrual cycle before I started having issues with it.
Mhm.
Like, I had no
No.
idea how to track it, what to look for, cervical mucus, this, like,
Mhm.
and so how do we
Yeah,
know?
and then when other people started to come to me to say, "Help me with this problem," I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to help myself too at the same time." How terrible that we're not taught this.
I know.
Yeah, we're hardly even as teenagers, we're really hardly even or preteens, we're
Yeah.
hardly even taught about puberty as we're going through it, and that's why so many girls struggle with it because it's just a scary process, and then, then we have our period, like, nobody knows what to do about it. I think the world is shifting.
I
I
think so.
think there's a lot more products and resources out there, and thank you to you for coming on this show right now because this is part of it. Like,
Yeah.
let's talk about it. Let's teach about it. So yeah, you're right. So it's one thing that we're having the conversation about, hey, it's good to get your period. It's important to get your period. It's healthy to get your period. And if you don't, let's address that. But the next thing is, wait, even if you are getting your period, like, is it too long of a cycle? I've got some
Yeah.
clients right now that are like, I get my period, but it's longer than 37 days. I get it every 45 days. I get it every 50 days. I mean, that's essentially skipping.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, did
Yeah.
you miss a month of your period? That's essentially what it is. And I've also that luteal phase deficiency. I've had a couple clients with that as well, which again, same thing is like the only reason we even know that because they might be getting their period every 35 days or something or 32 days. Okay, it's normal,
Yeah.
except because we're maybe also tracking ovulation, we recognize like the ovulation is hitting so much later, right? If ovulation should theoretically be mid-cycle and
Yeah.
it's like, oh no, I ovulated and then 6 days later I had my period. Ooh, that's a little
Yeah.
unusual. And that's literally happened to some of my clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
if you go from not having a period to ovulating and having a short luteal phase, like you just mentioned, okay, we're stepping in the right direction,
Progress.
right?
Yeah.
We're making progress. But if you're continuing to see this, or you're a woman out there that's just like, I feel like my periods are regular, but I can't seem to get pregnant. And I'm not saying that is the end all be all. It takes two to tango. You got to make sure your partner is all good to go
Mhm.
too. But,
Mhm.
that is a huge thing. And we just don't know. It's like, well, I'm getting a regular period, I'm ovulating, so, like, it should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think so this is huge. This is very important discussion for women who are trying to get pregnant. That
Yeah.
the whole
But
cycle needs to be
but
healthy.
also yes, but also, Lindsay, even if you're not trying to get pregnant, like, you need to have a normal luteal phase because if you're not,
Yeah.
your hormones aren't where they should be or
Well, exactly. I
were.
was gonna
Yeah.
get to that, like, what's happening in the luteal phase, that's when estrogen rises, and estrogen is where that's protective for your bones.
Mhm.
So, like, talking about amount of time that we have surges of estrogen to help with that bone health, because you mentioned that
Yeah.
statistic earlier. It's like, yeah, if your luteal phase is so short, then you're not having periods of time where you have higher estrogen. That's even more protective for
Yeah.
bone health. So, yeah, it's the question, and I don't know the answer to this, but it's the question of like, well, if you do 10 years of having a period, but you have this luteal phase deficiency, like, is that affecting long term health and, all in your body where you have estrogen receptors, including your bone, including your muscle? And I would assume the answer is
Yeah.
yes, it is affecting long
Yeah.
term health.
I would lean on the side of yes. And of course, this is probably not researched yet because HA isn't even really fully researched.
Right.
But, my guess would be that. And progesterone also plays a role in bone health. And,
Hmm.
that luteal phase, if it's too short, that's a direct indication that your progesterone levels aren't adequate either.
Hmm.
So, yeah, but I'd imagine, if you don't have a regular menstrual cycle where you are having a lengthy enough luteal phase, at least I would say definitely greater than 10 days, definitely greater, if not
Hmm.
more, 11 to 12.
Yeah.
Then yeah, absolutely. And then if you were to conceive and try to conceive and you couldn't, then we know that your body isn't in that place quite yet of like being an optimal place because if it was, you'd be able to create life, even if you don't want to create life.
Fans, I'm pausing the conversation again to check in on you. Are you concerned that you have REDS? That's relative energy deficiency in sport. It's a syndrome of not ideal health consequences and performance consequences that all stem from the idea that you're not fueling optimally or fueling enough for your sport needs. I've become an expert in this over the years because unfortunately, a lot of female athletes struggle with this. We have research that shows sometimes up to 90% of female athletes might be suffering from at least one of the side effects of REDS. Other research says that up to 45% of female athletes are struggling with disordered eating. These are big statistical numbers, and I don't like it. I'm here to help you become fierce, fit, and fueled. So first and foremost, head to lindseycortez.com/REDS to learn more about REDS, listen to past podcast episodes, and take our free REDS quiz to see if this might be a concern for you. From there, I've got 3 ways to help you. 1, download the REDS Recovery Guide and start taking action right away. 2, join our REDS Recovery membership. For a very affordable $15 a month, you will have access to me as a sports dietitian to educate and empower you to fuel better. We meet once a week for live calls, Q&A. You have access to the recordings if you can't join live, and a community group chat to support, encourage, and motivate you along the way to fuel fiercely. Last, spots are limited for one-on-one help, but I can help you personally through one-on-one coaching, be it my fast track program, the Female Athlete System of Transformation, or perhaps Fuel School, depending on your age. All of that is on my website, lindseycortez.com. But because one-on-one spots are limited, I really want to encourage you to join the REDS Recovery membership. We live in a world where it's very easy to just pop online, read an article, listen to a podcast, and I think we do a decent job at getting information out there, but we all need someone to talk to and really ask those personal questions, and also be open and honest in a community that's going to support you in your fueling needs and goals. And that's exactly what this membership is. So only $15 a month. We meet once a week, and you will be provided with so much education and empowerment and support. I know you won't regret joining. Head to lindseycortez.com/REDS, and there you will see the REDS Recovery membership that you can join, and join us this week. It's time for you to be fierce, fit, and fueled. Right. And that's another, yeah, again, for the women who are trying to conceive, that's another thing is if you're able to get pregnant, there's a lot of factors that go into holding a pregnancy. So I don't ever want to blame one thing, but you do want to make sure that your hormones are in a healthy place so that you can hold the pregnancy and create life,
Yeah, and not only that, Lindsay, and having healthy hormones comes down to adequate fuel for the body as well,
Mhm.
right? But think about what your body, the amount it takes on as far as energy needed to grow the baby. Then let's talk about postpartum breastfeeding, right? And so, that's a lot. And we want to come out of pregnancy having regular hormones, being able
Mhm.
to breastfeed our children. And then
Mhm.
also, I just want to side note is that many women that have gone on to have pregnancies via, say, fertility treatment and still have an active HA, a lot of them say, like, yeah, I was still able to breastfeed my child. And I'm gonna I'm gonna chalk that up to genetics of your body being like, well, that baby's more important than this body. I'm gonna make sure
Oh,
that,
yeah.
I feed that baby. But then I've also
Yeah.
heard women not being able to produce adequate, milk when they still have HA.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's also that, like, not only holding the
Right.
baby, but making sure your health is in good standing.
Yeah, because that is the thing about pregnancy. You and I have both gone through it twice ourselves. We both have 2 boys.
Mhm.
And, yeah, it's just your body will do everything for the baby.
Mhm.
And but at your own expense that sometimes you don't even realize until kind of it's all said and done and you wake up 2 years later like, "What the hell just happened?" And you feel fatigued and exhausted and you've lost muscle and because you just gave everything to grow and sustain this life as you're pregnant and in the postpartum period. So, yeah, that's why it's like, "Wait a second, let's get our hormones and our relationship with food and our fueling in a good place so that we are our strongest we can possibly be as we enter into this phase of being a woman and motherhood really. You wanna be as strong as you can be
Yeah, and be as
because
relaxed.
girl, it's exhausting.
Yes, and be as relaxed as you can be because postpartum hormones, they're just
Mhm.
crazy, but then B, like, do you want I mean, you and I can speak of it, like, do you wanna be like, "Oh my gosh, I have to wake up at 5 a.m. to get a workout in, and I have to," but your baby woke up, like, every hour on the hour.
Right.
Like, being able
Yeah.
I could sleep in. That's fine.
Mhm. Right, yeah, speaking more to that, like, behavioral, like, what got you to that place of HA? Were you, like, feeling you needed to be so regimented with your workouts, never miss a day, only eat clean foods, and, like, you really have to you have to, yeah, change your approach to food and exercise because and I don't say this to scare people. I love being a mom, but it's like you realize there's more it's a good slap in the face that there are way more important things
Yeah.
than my morning workout at 5 a.m. There are way more important things, but you have to accept that.
Mm,
And it's going to be a lot easier if you make those changes a little bit before becoming a mom
abs
than doing it at the same time because
Yeah, it
there's a lot of
definitely
changes already.
yeah, it can be challenging, to do both at once, but not impossible.
Not
Not
impossible, no.
impossible.
There's a lot you learn on the fly. So I learn everything about motherhood on the fly as
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
going through it.
I'm still waiting for the manual to raise
Yeah,
children to come out after I've
yeah.
given birth, but it still hasn't arrived.
Nope, 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 nope. The What to Expect books were decent, but and then, my baby number 2, Levi, was a totally different case. Nothing about him went by the book.
Mhm.
Every child's different.
Oh, yeah. Yep, yep, and I
Yeah,
I too sometimes struggle with that where I'm like, "Well, but he didn't do this and he does this." They say it's the second child, I don't know.
I've heard that as well. So getting back, I wanna go back to the luteal phase deficiency.
Mhm.
And so that's when you have a really short luteal phase. So my understanding of it, just please correct me where I might be wrong. My understanding is that ultimately we need to ovulate sooner. Is that correct?
So, ye yes and no. Okay,
Okay.
so first,
Yeah, because does it ovulate sooner or just the luteal phase has to
so
expand?
it's
Could
a
be either.
little I would say it's more of just the luteal phase to expand, but you could
Okay.
be having both. You could be having too long of a menstrual cycle. So typically what we'll see in too long of menstrual cycles that you are having these follicular waves, if you will. So think about it like almost like a car trying to start, and it just can't fully start yet. And then finally, after I don't know how many tries, it starts.
Okay.
Right. And so think of
Yep.
it kind
Revving
of
the engine.
yeah, so kind of think of it like literally like if you were to look at a temperature chart, so your BBT, which is your basal body temperature, if you were to look at that, because that'll indicate ovulation and whatnot, you'll see in some of these women where it's like these are these waves, and then you see your ovulation. So
Ah,
that tends to, if you have a longer follicular phase, that tends to lengthen the cycles. However, this kind of gets confusing here. It's like, well, if your, other labs, your other hormones aren't in check quite yet, and your
Mhm.
luteal phase is short, like even though you might have a longer follicular phase, it might look like a normal cycle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then let's just say you have a normal regular follicular phase, but then your cycle falls but lower than like 26 days. I like to say 26 days is like the cutoff that you'll be like, oh yeah, I probably have a short luteal phase going on here because I
Mhm.
confirmed ovulation. So yeah, does that kind of sort of like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah, that's
so not
helpful.
black and white.
So tracking your body temperature, because if you're trying to figure out where do I need, like, what needs to be fixed here? Because what I was thinking is, if you're tracking your body temperature and like you said, that you're trying to get the car started and it's just not going,
Mhm.
I'm thinking about the nutrition implications here. I feel in order to get like luteinizing hormone to surge, I've read research and studies to say that your food frequency matters with luteinizing hormone surging. So like maybe that is that one of your
Oh
tactics
yeah.
for
Eating frequently
fixing.
throughout the day.
Mhm,
Absolutely. Yep. Mhm.
mhm.
And then you know what? Sometimes, Lindsay, the body just, and again, every person is different in their recovery journey, but sometimes the body just needs more time. It's not
Yeah.
just always like, oh, we need to tweak this, we need to tweak that. But I always tell my clients, they probably all hate me for it. Like, let's be proactive instead of reactive,
Mhm.
right? Let's just say, if you haven't gotten, your confirmed ovulation yet, your second period or whatever, because a lot of them are very fearful of overshooting or eating more and resting more than they really should. And the thing is, we have other bodily systems that need repair. So you're
Yeah.
never overshooting anything. And if anything, by eating more of the right foods, carbs and fats and protein, balanced meals and snacks, it's just going to get you closer to not having that luteal phase defect or being able to ovulate, and having a healthy menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
So,
It's just I'm, like, smirking because just that fear that so many people have of, like, "But I don't wanna eat more than I should." It's like, who told you what you should eat? Like, what is your idea of what you should eat and what is too much? Because here you are with a health problem that it's not enough. You shouldn't be worrying about
yeah.
if it's more than you should. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, you should eat more than that in order to fix your health
But
problems. It's
it's
just right. I hear that all the time too, though.
And can I tell you, I was one of those people because you know where I got messed up by that and thinking like nutrition is so black and white and it's not, is by going to school to be a dietitian, of learning
Yeah.
like your BEE calculations or your TME.
Mhm.
I can't even remember the damn, or your ideal. I don't even remember.
You're like, I have learned to block that
Oh yeah,
information
yeah. I
out
totally
now.
unlearned
Yeah.
that. And or, you're five, like I'm barely 5'1". And
Mhm.
so, well, you're petite, so you don't need
Yeah.
that much.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
here's the thing,
Yeah.
to me, all those calculations are a crock of they can serve a purpose. Don't get me wrong. They can serve a purpose, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. It's
Yeah.
not the only piece of the puzzle. So,
Yeah.
but for me, it was like, oh, well, calories in versus calories out, right? And looking at my nutrition over a day of like,
Mhm.
well, oh my gosh, I don't need this much, or like I ate this much yesterday, or whatever. And the thing is, like, if you are missing your period or you have red S, like you are in an energy deficit. So I
Mhm.
like to say, like, think about getting out of debt, right? You don't
Mhm.
just like, well, maybe you win the lottery and you get out of debt. But it's rare, right?
But most people don't, right?
No.
And a lot of people who win the lottery end up in debt because then they get
Yeah.
taxed on it and they don't invest it
Yeah.
wisely.
Yeah.
I've read that before too.
I
So,
have.
anyways.
Yeah. So you want to think about it like you have your daily expenditure of like you have to go to work, you have to go to school, you have to care for your children, right? Then we have those are like our fixed expenses. And then we
Yeah.
have our extracurriculars like getting our hair done and our nails done. And you can think of this as like working out or,
Mhm.
training and whatever. So we don't have to do it, but we want to do it or as part of our career, whatever.
Yeah.
But then we're also in this energy deficit. But then we also think we only need X
So,
amount of
yeah.
calories because our height and weight or whatever damn calculation.
It's like, no, you still got credit card debt that you need to
Yeah.
pay
So
off
we
too.
gotta
Right.
pay that debt back, but also pay for our daily and monthly
Mhm.
expenses.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
need more than we think we do.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know what else I like about that analogy is going back to this thing of like, well, I don't want to have more than I than I should. I don't want to eat more than I need.
Mm.
But you get to the point of like, well, would you like to go to a fancier place for dinner? Would you like to treat yourself one more time? Like you can do more. And I'm going with the money idea here. Like if you have more money, you can spend more money. And that's what I like to do when it comes to my athletes. That go ahead and allow yourself more food. You might find that you just go get a new PR. You get to work out
Yeah.
harder. You get to literally you can do more
Yes.
if you allow yourself to eat more. So and that's once we've paid off our debt and healed from HA.
Yes.
Then who's to say I shouldn't eat more than this amount? Go ahead and eat more and see what your body does with it. I've got this one client right now. She just cracks me up because
Mm.
has that fear of like, oh, this is too much. That's a big breakfast, Lindsay. I don't, that's a really big snack. And then she'll go and eat it. And my next call with her, she's like, well, I ate that breakfast and I PR'd on my morning training run. I'm like, shut up. So she keeps thinking there's no way I can have that amount. She has that amount and then she just keeps getting faster
Yeah.
and faster after run. So it's like you have more, you end up spending
Yeah.
more. And in this case, like once you're healed from the HA, once you've paid off your debt, that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
And I never believed that to be true even for myself because
yeah,
I was never an athlete, but I certainly trained like one and I would
you
train
did.
all the time.
Mhm.
And now I train maybe 3 days a week and I'm stronger and fitter than I have ever been with my controlled diet and my working out all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So it is 100% true.
So I've mentioned this on a few other podcasts that I'm in the process of writing a book and I'm like, I know it's taking me forever, but it's happening no matter what. And I'm actually really proud of where I'm at with it right now. So anyways, it's funny though, I'm reaching out to agents and submitting to publishers and they want you to compare your book to other books on the market.
Oh,
And I'm like, there's not too many. And I think that calls for the need for it. But there's like one book out, and I'm not gonna say its name, but there's one book out that I'm like, okay, the theme of it is very similar to mine
mhm.
of like helping female athletes fuel their bodies and hopefully also like prevent a disordered relationship with food. But right away in chapter one, it gives equations for calculating your energy needs. And I'm like, throw it out. This is the problem. Here it is a book trying to help female athletes in chapter 1 talks about energy
Yeah.
calculating needs and even mentions ideal body weight. And I'm like, I was reading it online, but if it was physical, I would rip that right up because I'm like, this is the
I
problem.
think I know what book you're talking about. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is the crap
Yeah.
that exists. That's you think you're helping and you're contributing to the same problem. So, anyways, I'm proposing to write a complete nutrition book that doesn't give any calculations.
Yeah, I will be signing up for your book for sure. Pre-order,
Yeah.
pre-order.
Yeah, thanks, girl, thanks, girl. But anyway, so going back to how you mentioned, like, your own as a diet studying as a dietitian, that actually, like, hurt, like, understanding, like, what I should have doesn't help.
No, not at all. No, nope, and it drove me deeper into disordered ways,
Mhm,
and that wasn't the
mhm,
only thing, of course, it was very multifaceted,
mhm.
hearing from my mom, like, oh, she was counting calories and worried about her body, and then, bring in media of, like, the Special K diet, that was a thing back in my day, and,
Yeah,
eat this yogurt, and that if you wanna be healthy, you need to look a certain way and exercise every day. So it was very multifaceted, if you will. And at the end of the day, like I can look back and be like, well, I was only trying to be what I thought was my healthiest self. But
right.
you only know what you know when you know it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, is that an M&M wrapper or something?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
should have
You
been.
only know what you know when you know it. And then when you know different or know better, then you get to
You
make that
can
choice for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, again, this conversation is so important about talking about the menstrual cycle. What is a healthy menstrual cycle? And because, yeah, you were trying to be healthy. So we need to change the narrative as to what is healthy.
Yeah.
So you can look to your menstrual cycle as a reflection of if your hormones are in a healthy place. So if your menstrual cycle is missing, they're not. If you've got that really short luteal phase, if you're not ovulating, let's go over that real quick before we make this podcast too long. How can you tell if you're ovulating?
So that is a great question. And it kind of it varies, right? I'm going to tell you the approach that I take with my clients. And so some of them that are trying to get pregnant, it's like, all right, like I want to get pregnant yesterday. Let's track all the things that we can
Do all the
possibly
things.
track, right? So we'll start with
Mhm,
like the highest degree of how to tell. So if you track your BBT, which is your basal body temperature, you're going to see a temperature dip and then a shift. And I can't remember off the top of my head what like how many decimal points that is, but you're going to see your temperature dip and it's going to rise and it's going to stay up, right, until you
stay
get
up,
your
yeah. I
period.
know when it rises, it's at least half a degree,
Yeah.
sometimes more,
So,
right?
yes,
Mhm,
yes. So and it could vary, but it's you'll see it if you were to chart it, which if you're tracking, you're probably putting it into an app, but you're gonna
mhm,
see a noticeable dip shift upwards, and then it's gonna stay upwards.
mhm,
But that I like to say you need to combine that with what your cervical mucus is doing. So if you have zero cervical mucus and you get this temp spike, I don't you could potentially be sick. So BB could be
mm,
impacted by hydration. It could be impacted by like if you're traveling abroad, time differences.
mhm,
It could be, from being sick or having
mhm,
viruses or like just getting a high temperature because, you're fighting something off. So you need to combine it with making sure the cervical mucus is appropriate, which is typically egg white cervical mucus. And so that literally
mhm,
think of like breaking an egg and a raw
mhm,
egg white. So you're looking for that combination of, you could always get an ultrasound to
mhm,
do that. You can get some blood work to do it, but that's a little bit more
mhm,
invasive. So that's the route I'll take with my clients that are like, I want to be pregnant yesterday, is looking at their BBT and then also combining it with cervical mucus. Now, if
mhm,
a woman is like, you know what, I'm not in a rush to get pregnant. I like to take the approach of let's not get too tracky because girlfriend, you've probably been
mhm,
tracking your ass off with like food and with workouts
mhm,
for who knows how long. Let's
yeah,
kind of let's take a step back from the control a bit and I'll say, all right,
yeah,
let's notice. Let's just monitor or I wouldn't even say monitor. That's kind of more of a control-ish kind of word, but let's be curious about
yeah,
our CM. Maybe jot it down in an app. I don't push them to temping unless I'm like, oh, I'm really stumped if you ovulated or not.
yeah, yeah,
So, but just being curious about your cervical mucus and then also being curious about other signs and symptoms of ovulation. A lot of women get increased libido. They will see, not cramping, but like a tenderness in their ovary area. So there's
mhm.
other things where we could say some women get super bloated. So kind of noticing the
I
body.
I'll just share, I get that when I ovulate, it's very s I for, like, 2 days, it feels like PMS symptoms, but it's ovulation.
Yeah, sometimes I'm
Mhm.
like, damn, I feel like I'm about to have my period. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's
I'm
yeah,
ovulating. Yeah. So
yeah, yeah.
and I like if you wanna get pregnant like yesterday, like, let's do it because I know
Mhm,
firsthand what it's like to want to get pregnant and not be able to get pregnant when you want.
mhm,
But if you're not in a rush to be able to start to connect with your body a lot more and be like, "Oh, look
yeah,
at that kind of CM," or like, "Oh, I'm noticing this sign," or "Oh, I'm noticing my increased hunger around this time," that you can start to connect with your body more deeply. And
mhm.
that in turn builds that really self-awareness, that inner confidence of being able to make sure your cycle never falls off track.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I'm gonna throw one other thing in this conversation and see if I can wrap it up quickly because 'cause I've got another call, but I do have some clients, some athletes that are on the IUD.
mm,
And when you're on the IUD, sometimes your body will so this is an intrauterine device, sometimes your body will stop having a menstrual cycle. So this is a form of birth control, but you should still be ovulating when you're on the IUD.
so that I'm not sure about the ovulation on the IUD. I want to say, gosh, I can't remember the mechanism. I know the hormonal. No, actually, Lindsay, it depends
Which the
what
hormonal
one.
versus the
Sorry. Yeah.
non-hormonal
So we have our
IUD.
copper
Mhm.
IUD, which that's what I really
Yeah,
recommend to my clients because it's non-hormonal based. If they're like, yeah, I really need to be on birth control, but I don't want to go on hormones.
right.
So I would say that just disrupts the pH for the sperm to not
Yep,
be able to get there. And then the
right.
hormonal IUDs are pretty much halting ovulation.
So
So,
yes, so that's what I was gearing at, the non-hormonal IUD, because I think that's where
yes.
what my clients have come to me because of athletes being, I don't want to get pregnant, but I want to maintain my hormones. They do the copper IUD, the non-hormonal. So with that being said, they might still be able to track ovulation
Yes,
with some of like cervical
absolutely.
mucus. And that's one way, because if your period goes away and you're on that non-hormonal copper
Oh,
IUD,
that
my athletes are still confused. Like, how do I know if I'm not going in an energy deficit? And that's where I tell them, let's track ovulation. And
yeah,
sometimes I even throw in there the luteinizing hormone test strips to see,
yeah,
do you have luteinizing hormone
and
surging? So they might, pee on their little luteinizing hormone test strip for a few days that they're thinking they might be ovulating
yeah,
at to see. So that's a tactic that I've done in my athletes, that the period's missing, but it's because of the copper IUD. We still track ovulation to make sure that we have a
yes.
healthy
With the
hormonal
copper
cycle.
IUD, though, they still should be getting a period. So if they are truly
Mm,
ovulating, they should still be getting a period.
yeah,
Now you can have LH surges on those test strips, which they call them ovulation predictor kits, which I think they should
they're not fully.
have they should just be LH test strips. That
Yeah.
because just because you're having surges in your LH doesn't mean you're ovulating.
Okay.
So that's the thing where, somebody, oh my God, but I got a positive test strip. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
cool. You have LH in your
Good.
system. So
Which is good,
yeah.
needed,
But
but
it
might, yeah.
doesn't, that's where a lot of women will be like, well, yeah, but I'm testing positive with my OPKs. That's for sure. OPKs. And it's like, well, if you're not getting a period, yeah,
Mhm,
then that's a problem. Now, if those, in fact, those women on the copper IUDs, it should produce a regular menstrual cycle. It should
mhm,
be a regular ovulatory menstrual cycle. And if there is no period, then that is definitely a red flag. And then those that are on the hormonal IUDs, it's important, to pay attention to other signs of, red
yeah,
S, right? And then if you're
right,
really curious, then you might want to get it removed and see what's what.
mhm,
I know it's a pain in the butt, but if you really want to
mhm,
make sure you're training to the best of your ability and doing all the
mhm,
things your body needs to be the strongest, most longevity person of yourself, then it's
mhm,
important to check that out.
yeah. Wow, we covered a lot,
Yes,
Cynthia. That
we
was
did.
great. There was much needed to talk, I think, to talk beyond just the period, like, to
Yeah,
talk about the whole cycle, and that was so helpful. Thank you so
you're
much.
so welcome, Lindsay. All my
Yeah.
pleasure.
So we're going to include in the show notes links to your websites, of course. You said you have a fact sheet that kind of will go over some blood work of HA and PCOS, since there is a lot of misdiagnosis, and the links to the studies if people are
Yeah,
interested in being a participant to help further research in HA. And of course, on your website and your Instagram, and how to get in touch with you if people need further help and coaching to heal and recover from HA. So thank you, Cynthia.
thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Please help spread the message of empowering female athletes to be fierce, fit, and fueled by giving this podcast a 5-star review and leaving a comment. You can also help more female athletes by sending this episode to a friend. Head to lindseycortes.com for more resources, information, more episodes, ways to work together, downloadable guides, and ebooks. And if you're interested in becoming a guest on the show or have a guest suggestion, head to lindseycortes.com/podcast, and there's a form for you to fill out to get on the show. Hey, there's more resources on my YouTube channel, Female Athlete Nutrition, Instagram at female.athlete.nutrition, and private Facebook group, Female Athlete Nutrition. I think you get the point. I'm here to support female athletes by fueling better and becoming fierce, fit, and fueled. Most importantly, if you need help, reach out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next show.